Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, one and all. You may notice we're having some slight technical difficulties. Some would say this is a blessing. My camera has decided to stop working this morning. So after 30 minutes of turning my computer on and off, Rob was like, just fucking do it without the camera, you dickhead.
Actually, it's so hot in the UK, about to get to 34 degrees. Lee is actually naked, so we felt that it wasn't
I
appropriate
have
to
actually
have
got
him
my
on screen.
fan. I have got my fan sat right next to me, but I think it was more like, women would just like throw themselves off buildings and running into traffic if they saw me naked.
You're
So,
exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
you know.
Not wrong.
Anyways, I am uh Lee at Death from the Shadows. Quite apt today because I could quite literally be a Raven Guard in the shadows because you can't fucking see me. And joining me today is Rob at Meadows Miniatures. Before we go into okay, so warning. This episode contains me, so features an above healthy level of bad language.
I feel that's a bit unfair. I feel I'm just as
Yeah,
I'm just as bad with my language. It's usually John who's the tame one, but
yeah.
for some reason you get all the
I
abuse.
get I get the blame for it.
Yeah.
But Rob also has a potty mouth. So if you don't like bad language,
Fuck off.
probably not the show for you. Um, wow, wow, wow. Before we get started on what we're going to be talking about today, just a shout out to our sponsors. First up, Bits Monsters. Go check them out, based in Northern Ireland. For all your heresy goodness, they basically buy boxes, split them up. They got free UK shipping for over 25 quid. And if you use the code Heresy Hammer, you get 10% off all heresy
It's
items.
gonna be useful when you want your phalanx
Yes.
rather than a whole big battle box. So.
And Gator 3D at Gator 3D, check him out for some sublime uh, printing services for all your printing needs. If you've got anything you want, whether it be miniatures or you want to add some pads or helmets or whatever you want to do, give Get 3D a shout and they will hook you up. And then last one for now is Kirton Games based near John. I've not used them personally, but Rob and John shout their praises.
Yeah,
So go check them out
they're
and
great.
also check out their events. They run a host of heresy based events. So go check them out. But today we are doing the finale of our Beta-Garmon lore episodes. So this is part three. If you haven't seen the first two, go and watch them. Although this is kind of slightly out of sequence, I think, just because the way
Yeah,
the books were.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, the first our first episode, if people are just coming into this now, kind of explains what Beta-Garmon was, I guess. The second episode talks about the introductions of the Primarchs and essentially, really, the Khan. He's really the one that we follow most of all.
Yeah.
But this is the bit in between, isn't it? This is the bit in between those two
Yeah, so
episodes.
this is literally it is just purely pretty much. There's a few other bits going on, but it is pretty much just the battle for how do you
Nearcon. Yeah,
Nearcon. We're going with
yeah,
Nearcon.
Nearcon. Yeah.
Nearcon City. It talks a little bit about the kind of battle for Beta Garmon 2, but pretty much most of the book. And I was just saying to Rob, like, I'm actually really surprised at how much fluff there is in this book. This is the Legions Imperialis, the Great Slaughter book we're talking about today. Um, and yeah, it's a lot. It took me, I'm not good with words, and it took me time to read it. So
It's a battle on a epic scale, which is
it
perfect
really
for
is.
Legions Imperialis,
Yeah,
isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
that's that's what it's all about. I mean, it's kind of like a mini um Siege of Terror, I guess, is kind of
yeah,
sorry,
yeah, yeah,
Siege of the
yeah,
Imperial
yeah,
Palace, I think is the way I would
yeah.
describe it.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, and I think the book does a really good job of kind of showing the scale of death and destruction and despair that fighting um, in the Garmin system uh, kind of was all about at this stage of the war.
100%.
But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. I there's a few bits I disliked. I've written some notes because otherwise I forget things because I'm old. Uh, but I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed the fluff, and like I've said already, like it was way more in depth than I thought. I thought it was just going to be like, and they pulled up to the city and they shot it, and the
Yeah.
walls fell down and they went in. But it was really, really good.
You know,
There's
it's like lots of these things where we did it with the Siege of Cathonia as well. These are almost like mini novels, aren't they? Kind of
yeah,
like they're
yeah,
often
yeah,
strategic overviews.
yeah, and
They tell
actually.
a story. You know, it is a novel in its own right.
I I actually prefer the way these are written than battles in the novel
Hmm.
because this gives you almost like a strategic overview of
Yeah,
what's happening.
yeah,
Whereas the battles in the novel is like headshot, headshot,
yeah,
headshot,
yeah,
headshot, chainsawed someone, headshot,
yeah,
headshot, and then 10,000 people died, and you're like, oh, great, yeah, cool.
yeah,
Whereas this actually kind of breaks down, these people were doing this, these people were doing that, and
yeah.
I kind of prefer that yeah, like I say, strategic overview. But
You get a
yeah,
sense of the scale of the battle, don't you? Whereas in the
yeah,
novels, because it's often following only one protagonist and what they're doing, or at least the perspective is from one protagonist, it's difficult to get the sense of scale.
and I've always just found that it's actually very hard for writers to make fight scenes interesting
Hmm.
because they either don't really describe it enough or they describe it in so much detail that you're not, and then they parried this way and then he punched it and you're not really sure what you like what he did what now, like okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just becomes nonsense. Whereas yeah, no, I really enjoyed this book. So let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
So previously on Heresy Hammer. So as we've kind of mentioned already, part one covered the setting, the sector, and the initial moves of the loyalist and traitor forces to secure the sector in the early years of the Heresy. So this was kind of literally right after the drop site massacres,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
where it kind of starts. And then part two covered the contents of the Heresy Hammer, sorry, Horus Heresy Beta-Garmon campaign. But looking at the Khan and the White Scars, Shadrach Medusan and the Shattered Legions, and the legend that is Endred Har, and the Black Shields as they fought against the traitors to delay them, culminating in the destruction of the Sons of Horus, great gene forgers on Zeta Garmon. And
Endred
as we,
Har and his fake
oh,
mustache.
yeah, yeah.
Always impersonating Sons of Horus officers.
His box of disguises. I can't remember if I said it when we did the show, but I listened to a podcast talking about the Wagner mercenary group,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and they were talking about the guy who used to run it, and
yeah.
who
He
Putin
got
had
shot down.
killed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and after he was killed, the Russians basically started a campaign to kind of smear him, to
yeah,
make him look like a bit of a prat. And
yeah.
one of the things he used to do is he used to travel abroad in disguises. And they released pictures of these disguises because when they raided his mansion, they found all these disguises. And it is literally like if you go and see some of the pictures, it's like comedy level. He's got like these general outfits and stick-on mustaches.
Oh,
It's
that's
literally
oh my god.
so as soon as you say that, I think of the guy.
The
Yeah,
Wagner group. Okay, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
nice.
And yeah, like we've already said in this video, we are going to be focusing on the events of the Great Slaughter, and from the Legions Imperialis campaign book, which focuses mostly on the siege of Nikon
I
City.
I mean, it's um no surprise that basically this campaign book and the campaign, the story it tells, has everything that you would expect to see from the Legion's Imperialis models, right? So it's got Titans. It
Yeah,
makes a lot of mention of speeders. There's lots of tanks from Solar Auxilia, but also from the legions as
hundreds of
well.
tanks.
Yeah, so it's kind
Yeah,
of it's been written with the game, the Legions Imperialis in
yeah,
mind. That's what
yeah,
I felt
yeah.
when I was reading it
Which
up.
is fair enough, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, absolutely.
That's what they're trying to sell. But
Yep.
also, yeah, I think this book is another perfect example and where you could run an event and it could be just 28 mil or it
Yep.
could be 28 mil an epic or you
Hmm.
could do 80 as well. Like or all three of them run simultaneously. I just think it lends itself
Yeah.
perfectly to that.
100%.
Yes. So the great slaughter begins. So the story opens up with the arrival of 10,000 warships under Horus's command entering the system, finding the entire sector in open war. So yeah, basically Horus has turned up and he knows that he doesn't want to commit his entire force to the fight because basically it's going to take too long. It's going to take too long to deploy that many ships and to land that many troops that he cuts off. I think it says in the book like 1/10 of his entire fleet, which is 10,000 ships, and their task is basically destroy Beta-Garmon.
Mm.
Um, and then within Beta-Garmon, you got Nikon City and the Diviner's Needle on Beta-Garmon 3, and they are still within Loyalist hands. But again, it's all kind of that grey area of it is in Loyalist hands, but it's not fully under the control of Loyalists. By this stage of the war, everyone's fighting.
Yeah.
Everyone's, if you're a civilian, you've picked up your
Pitchfork.
spade, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're whacking, Space Marines on the knee with yeah, with your spade as you get your head stoved in. Dawn has also sent his first fleet, consisting of Iron Father Vilgus Darrett, survivor of Istvan, at the front of a host of 1,000 fresh Iron Hand inductee.
These guys play quite a pivotal role, actually.
They do,
And if
yeah,
you wanted
yeah,
to create an Iron Hands force, 28 mil or that kind of Legions Imperialis size, then this is a great one
Pretty
to base it
cool, yeah,
around. Yeah.
yeah. So they are dispatched to Borman 2, which is on the fringes of the Garmin system. And essentially, they go in and they liberate that area and they set it up as their base of operations. And like a lot of things during the Garmin conflict, they kind of put their flag down and people start coming towards them. And
Mhm.
they actually end up with quite a large force. They end up with Titans, Knights, militia units, Solo Auxilia, all kind of come towards their banner. So their initial assault on Borman 2 is against an Emperor's Children force,
I
and they
thought this was
tend
the
to
most
give battle.
wacky Emperor's Children thing to happen.
So I was going to say that of all the book, this was the bit I disliked the most.
Right, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
way it was explained, I don't know if he's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
So the Emperor's Children kind of and I get what they're trying to get at in the book. I just don't think of I really enjoyed the whole book, but I think this was the bit that just was a bit silly.
it's the arrogance of the Emperor's Children, isn't it? This is
And I think
what
that's
this
what was
illustrates.
trying to get across, but
Yeah,
it just came across as being a bit shit,
yeah.
really. Like, so the Emperor's Children view the inductee force of open contempt. They make no attempt to prevent the landing, and they lined up basically in parade formation in three long lines in front of the largest city. And the Iron Hands launch an attack, but the Iron Hands attack isn't that much better. It's basically like Napoleonic French tactics of getting three large blobs and just walk towards them.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think initially, like the Emperor's Children move their tanks away because the tanks are like, oh well, there's no armor, so they kind of the tanks just like, well, we're not doing anything here. Um, But then when the Emperor's Children finally move their tanks in, the Iron Hands spring their trap. Waha! And hidden behind the banners. I don't know what, like someone had a really large power
It's really
pack.
interesting because they describe it as plain. So I'm like, well, it's going to be
Yeah.
pretty
How
flat,
the
I would imagine.
fuck
Not sure
can
how they hit
someone not
these.
see? And this was one of the bits that I was like, oh God. So basically, there was a load of grav speeders and land speeders hidden behind these inductae. Ta-da! And they sweep forward and destroy the Emperor's Children tanks, and the Emperor's Children are surprised. And then the fury of the inductee Iron Hands basically smash into these Emperor's Children, who refuse to surrender and die to the last man fighting. And the Iron Hands, well, so yeah, the Iron Hands in a kind of ironic twist of fate, cut off all the heads of the Emperor's children, stack up their heads, and stick a banner
Yeah.
In this pile of Empress Children's heads to declare victory, but also I feel like there's some daddy issues there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I know what you mean. I think that it's although I kind of feel like this is definitely something Eidolon would do. Like this is such an Eidolon move, especially in
I
those early books,
I
to like
didn't,
be in parade formation,
yeah,
rather than using Saul Tarvit's kind of tactics to bring down an enemy.
I didn't
Um,
hate the idea of it. I just feel the way it was written was a bit lazy. It's just like we had these land speeders hidden
yeah.
behind us.
I
Ta-da!
well, I tell you what, a common theme of all these episodes, including the siege of all the, in fact, all the lore episodes we've ever done, is that there's always a trap. There's always
Always, yeah,
a counter jab that they are not suspecting.
and we'll
Um,
see more of that yet. But this one was particularly good. I just like, what the fuck? Where were they hiding? You just described they're in three blobs, these Inducto running forwards, and then all of a sudden these land speeders and whatnot just appear. You're like, I don't know, like I just feel they could have done something uh a bit more intelligent than just ta-da, like surprise. But yeah, so basically the Emperor's Iron Hands take over this area. Uh, and it becomes like their base of operations while they build
yeah,
up forces, and they will come into play later on. But back to Beta-Garmon 2 and Nikon City. So Nikon City is home of the sector government of the Palatine Lady and is held by the Loyalists. And this is described as being kind of one of the only places that is actually entirely held by the Loyalists. The traitors can't attack directly due to the Anvil, which is a massive spaceship star platform in orbit above the city. So if they try to fly any of their fleet in, this anvil will just destroy any ships that come near it. So the traitors have to commit outside of Nikon City. They can't launch an assault directly on Nikon City. So traitors commit, and this is the second bit of the book that I didn't quite understand, but we'll get to that in a minute. So traitors commit a force of 21,000 Marines, 500,000 solo auxilia from the Chthonian headhunters, and over 3 million Imperial Army soldiers, 4 full knight households, and 2 Titan legios to their invasion. So
that's
this
a
is a
big old force,
massive
isn't it?
force.
Yeah, it's
This is a
huge.
massive force. And Chieftain Urson Kinslayer Enshar of the Sons of Horus takes command of the assault on Beta-Garmon 2. He's known for his recklessness and callously throwing his forces into the meat grinders. So he's
That's
basically like
that's
half
yeah.
Iron Warrior.
That's
Uh,
why it's called Kinslayer, isn't it? Because he's just
yeah, and he orders a full drop pod assault on the hive city of Medacon, which I thought was quite apt, like Medacon,
yeah, yeah, I like that.
on the opposite side of the continent to Nikon City. So basically, they can't launch an assault
Yeah,
on the city they want to. So he launches an assault on a easier, less defended hive city. Um, Hive Medicon has pretty much been untouched by the war due to its incredibly potent defensive turrets and weapon batteries. Nevertheless, the Sons of Horus drop pod assault rains down on the city, taking extensive losses. They land inside the wall, and the only defenders are Secundus Levy, who are no match for the Sons of Horus Astartes, other than their super heavy tanks. But these are swiftly countered by Leviathan dreadnoughts fighting kind
oh
of close
yeah,
combat.
that's really cool. I love that.
And it kind of describes that they managed to kind of within the confines of the city they managed to kind of the dreadnoughts get in close and start tearing these tanks to pieces. Now this is the bit that I kind of didn't really get. So Chieftain Enshar once served with the Night Lords and understands the powerful effect of fearful refugees reaching other hives. So, as a final act, the Sons of Horus fleet bombards Medicon, turning it into a funeral pyre, visible for hundreds of kilometers. So, basically, they launch this assault on this city. They take the city. They let all these refugees flood out to go
Yeah,
and
yeah.
cry and scream, and then they destroy the city from space. They fleet bombard it. Here's an idea: just bombard the city. Like,
Well,
why do you
the
have to take the city?
Oh
to
yeah, I
bombard
suppose.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I
land
understand what you mean. Yeah,
outside the city and then
yeah,
just sit there having a fag whilst you watch
yeah.
your fleet destroy it. It's the
Because
same.
you're not fortifying it, are you? That's the
No,
thing.
you're not
Yeah,
doing anything with it. It's not your base of operations. You've not
yeah,
taken it over to launch assaults from. You've literally launched this and a fairly costly assault,
yeah,
drop pod assault on this city. You take the city and then you walk outside of the city and you let your fleet destroy it. And I was just a bit like,
yeah.
say what now?
That's why you should be in a Legion Astartes strategically.
Well, you
You
know what
should
I
be in
mean.
organizing the Great Crusade.
It would have been over a lot quicker, apparently. So yeah, so that was the only bit. I like the idea of the drop pod assault. I love the idea of them letting the refugees go to
Yeah.
kind of sow terror to
Yeah, and
the other hive
that
cities.
will be a factor later on in
Yes.
the siege of Nikon City. Actually,
But the then destroying the thing you've just fought to capture, I guess it kind of leads on to, the whole like by now, the Garmin war is so futile because basically everything just ends up
yeah,
dead.
just fucked.
But it just kind of seemed a bit daft to me. Um, and then the traitor host starts this long march to Nikon City, driving hordes of fleeing civilians ahead. A force of
Well, a long march doesn't really cut it either. I mean, it's across the other side of the globe.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
So you're
imagine
not
just
popping down your
walking from
shop.
one side of the globe to the other side of the globe.
um, A force of world eaters? No, no, this is probably the last thing I disliked. What's the name of the world eaters? Riptide. I just have
It
like
gave me
this.
like Australian beach
Yeah.
vibes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, do they wear their nails like long and hanging down and just say like, yeah, bro, and radical? So I wasn't, yeah, because the other group was
Riding
called
on
the
their
Red
grav
Tide.
speeder
Yeah, literally
surfboards.
surfing grav speeders, shouting radical. Yeah. So yeah, a force of world eaters known as Riptide are overhead. 1,000 blood-crazed bikers and grav speeders. They take far longer to reach Nikon than planned, as they keep stopping to murder everyone.
Yeah, sounds about
Um,
right. Can't be relied upon the world eaters, can they?
Kind of classic world eaters, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Put them down, let them go, and they will just
It seems unusual that you would
murder.
try and coordinate world eaters.
Well,
Like
I kind of
by this
feel like
point,
they don't.
you just yeah, just
Yeah,
let them go do their thing.
the impression I kind of get, it doesn't really explain it in the book, is that he's just like, yeah, go on, you fucking lunatics. Like, off you go on. And I guess they're kind of leaning into this um sowing fear amongst the planet's population because there's just 1,000 batshit Astartes flying around, uh, murdering people.
On bikes. Yeah, again,
Yeah, yeah.
another really cool concept for a force, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So the traitor hosts and so basically as they're going along, they keep coming across hive cities and pretty much just destroying them all. They come across hive Vardis Termini who offer to parley, and the Death Guard seal the city and spend days bombarding
Please,
with
let's talk.
toxic
No, I don't
munitions.
think so. I don't think
Um,
so.
yes, yeah, a bit of hearts and minds there for you. So yeah, well done, Death Guard. And the next encounter is Hive Harkon, who immediately surrender. Disgusted at this cowardice, the maniples of Legio Astorum stationed there collapse the defensive walls from the inside so they can march out to fight Legio Mortis.
Nice.
So this
Just
is
take a
pretty
few
cool.
civilians with us,
Yeah, so
bloody
basically, yeah, the
traitors.
Legio Astorum are so disgusted that they're just like, screw you guys. And
Yeah.
then they go and die.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So the siege. So eventually they kind of get to the Nikon city. Uh, Population of 2 billion people.
That is nuts, isn't it? Like when I
Yeah,
read that, I was like, "What the effing
yeah,
fuck?" Like
yeah.
2 billion people in just one.
I mean, I feel like our tiny little brains can't really comprehend.
No, not at all. And all because this is why I was like, "Oh, this is quite a good comparison with the Siege of Terror, but or the Siege of the Imperial Palace." But then I was like, "How many people are actually in the?" Because I would have said, "Oh, there's probably like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion in the palace," but there must have been way more, like
Yeah, I don't
10
know.
billion,
Yeah, yeah.
20 billion, if there's
Ah,
only no, only 2 billion in Neocon City. So if anybody knows how many people were at the siege of the Imperial Palace, then let us know in the comments below because
yeah.
yeah, this blew my mind.
Um, yeah, like I say, I mean, we can't really comprehend that, can we? So it's defended by two curtain walls and five defensive towers,
Yeah.
and each of these towers is armed with a relic cannon of immense power. So these relic cannons can literally destroy warlord titans with
Yeah,
one
just
shot.
in a shot, right? Yeah,
So
just literally like,
how?
yeah,
And this, like we've already said, is fully under loyalist control. Uh, it's protected from space by the spaceport, and it's protected on the ground by this kind of immense wall and these towers. And you can see the towers in the picture. Um, and yeah, and these towers alone are like their own defensive structures.
yeah,
So as we'll get into, even once parts of the city start getting taken, the towers become like standalone
yeah,
bastions.
yeah. They can stand actually
So
against them. Yeah,
yeah, and yeah, so unwilling to face the strength of the surface guns, the Sons of Horus descend into the underground mag tunnels. Now, this was a bit where I initially disliked this, and then when I got into the story, because I was like, "Oh, look, there's a tunnel!" Ha oh, fucking hell.
convenient.
Um,
Yeah,
so before the war, they used to use the grav rail tunnels to move vast transport arcs into the city. Most of them were collapsed by the war effort, and the remaining few are heavily mined and full of toxins and rad poisons. But this does not stop the Sons of Horus or their Death Guard
no,
allies.
well,
As their
definitely won't
many
stop the death
fall,
guard, will it? They'll
no,
love it. They'll
no.
be taking their helmets off and breathing that sweet toxins in.
And basically, yeah, they go through these tunnels and it like melts their armor and they come out all grey and mush, and a lot of them die. Um, but they essentially emerge in what is called the Terminus Hall. Um, and up to this point, I was like, oh, for fuck's sakes, like classic, a tunnel. But then again, it's a trap. So the loyalists knew they were going to use this,
Yeah,
and they kind of basically ambush the Sons of Horus as they start coming out of this Terminus Hall, and essentially the traitors capture the Terminus, but any attempts to kind of move out of the Terminus into the city are blocked by solar auxiliary artillery positions
yeah.
and kind of super heavy tanks.
Yeah. So
Um,
should we just go back one just so we can show people where the Terminus Hall is? Because it's
oh
on
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
west of the far west of the
Uh,
city, isn't it? It's just outside the city
Yes, so
wall. So
you
yeah,
can
there's
see,
Terminus Hall on the far left there.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of sticking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of it turns into a deadlock. The Sons of Horus have taken this position, but
They
they
can't
can't leave
can't actually
there.
get out of it, can they? Yeah.
Yeah, and the defenders rally to reinforce the terminus, and the true nature of this distraction is revealed.
Dun, dun, dun.
So again, a trap that becomes a trap.
A trap on a
And I
trap.
quite like this bit. So basically, Storm Eagles, fire raptors approach the city, flying suicidally low and fast, many crashing into desert rocks, they skim a few meters above. Crossing the wall, they unload hordes of ravening world eaters into the outer city limits, all the while strafing the auxiliary defending the terminus. So again, it was quite I quite enjoyed this bit. The Sons of Horus kind of knew it was a trap. They took the trap and then they sprung their own trap. So it's a trap
Yes.
within a trap within a trap. Like my
Yes.
God, like just
Mad Russian doll situation, isn't it? Yeah.
like we love traps. We love traps. But I actually quite enjoyed this. And yeah, using this distraction, the Sons of Horus and the Death Guard within the terminus sally forth, triggering her out in the defenders. So they're kind of in. The Death Guard move to assault the. Oh Christ! Here we go.
Amethyst. Yeah,
Ameth,
amethyst. I just said amethyst. Amethyst. It's just got an e.
Amethyst.
I think it's got an e at the end of it, but I think it's just amethyst.
Amethyst Tower, one of the largest defensive weapons of the city. Massed haywire, melted charges disrupt its power and targeting arrays, but the tower remains standing thanks to reinforcements from the Saturnine rams.
Yeah.
So they try taking out one of these towers and it kind of fails, but they do cause a little bit of damage to the tower. The massive relic cannon of the Amethite Tower briefly offline, the traitor horde of hundreds of land raiders and Spartans break cover and approach the city at full speed. And I really like the way this is described in the book. It is literally
Yeah,
hundreds. I think it's like 300 land raiders
yeah,
and Spartans or something. So it's this massive, massive
very,
tank
very
battle.
cool, isn't it? Yeah,
Almost kind of Talon style
yeah.
across the desert.
That's what it reminded me of, actually. Yeah,
Yeah. And in response, Palatine Lady mobilizes the Pancrypta forces, and 1,000 Leman Russ and Malcadors leave the city walls to meet them. Um, which again, I really, really love the idea of
yeah,
like massed solo auxiliary tanks riding out to meet the Astartes. Running tank battles on the plain before the city match the traitor land raiders and their superior firepower against the auxiliary Leman Russ speed and numbers. And they kind of describe how the Leman Russ have to get close to counter the range and strength of the last cannons. The Sons of Norris Death Guard contained by the Saturnan Rams and the tank companies in the field, there is no one to stop the World Eater rampage until 3,000 Blood Angels leave their positions on the southern wall and drop in to stop their slaughter. The battle grinds to an attrition with both sides losing significant forces. And again, I really like the way the Blood Angel is described in this because they basically become feral.
yeah,
They are literally, this isn't your pretty, handsome Blood Angels. This
yeah.
is your
This is
vampire.
Revenant Legion ripping
Yeah,
throats out of
like
yeah, really
and
frightening stuff. Yeah.
and it goes on to kind of describe how they shut off entire areas where these blood angels are operating because they
And they
are
were just
just
like, we're
gonna
not going in there, fucking
they're
hell.
just
Yeah,
gonna eat you. Like
yeah,
they'll eat your face if you go
yeah,
in there. They don't care if you're on their side.
yeah,
Um, and it grinds into a battle of attrition with both sides losing significant forces. On the eventual arrival in Imperial Fists, only the eventual arrival of the Imperial Fist to clear the outer city limits forces a traitor retreat.
yeah.
Uh, Outraged at the loyalist militia tanks being able to withdraw, a lone Legio Mortis warlord attempts to fire on them before a blast from the reactivated Amethite tower gun annihilates it in a single shot.
And that just
So
shows you
they,
because they've got five of these, haven't they? And they're just yeah. And this
yes,
is why they couldn't assault it straight off the bat.
so
You
so
know,
they managed to get this gun operating again very quickly because it's iron hands that are in there like tinkering away.
yeah,
And yeah, it literally one shots a Legio Mortis warlord.
yeah,
Um, and uh, the first siege ends with
yeah.
disaster.
Yeah.
Well, not
So
necessarily
it's
disaster.
interesting. One of the things, and this is a geographical point more than anything, and this is something again that came up when we did the Siege of Cathonia. Lots of these like hive cities and habs are kind of like self-contained. You know, if you think about like great cities in the ancient period, you know, think of like um, Carthage and places like that. They were
Yeah.
walled cities, but they would have like farms outside of them and stuff, and there's still people
Yes.
lived outside them. What's quite interesting with all the maps we look at in these episodes is that like it's just barren, featureless plains, and then the hive cities are the only things there, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Convenient for
Yeah,
battles.
it's yeah, it's handy, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's more like kind of your mega cities, isn't it?
Yeah,
Rather
yeah,
than yeah,
yeah.
kind of middle-aged. I guess yeah, it
Reminds me
is
of
interesting.
Mandalore. If anybody's into Star Wars and the Clone Wars, like that's very much how like the Mandalore was basically.
You would think with 2 billion people living in the city, someone would be like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna go set a tent up outside."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting, I think, because um, from all these episodes, it always strikes me that everyone lives in a city. Nobody lives outside. There's not like small pockets of towns, or at least that it's never mentioned.
No, I mean maybe
Um,
it's just that they haven't thought about it to be
so
honest.
so
Because
also insignificant that it doesn't. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not
because
worth
if you look
mentioning.
at the Necromunda kind of lore, they have the kind of wastelands where there's
Yeah,
people and towns and
yeah,
people live. People used to. I mean, you go back to like you're saying before, like Middle Ages. Uh, Even before that, people would live under the protection of the walled whatever it was, castle, fortress,
yeah.
whatever. And then when the baddies came, they'd all just grab their belongings
Go into
and
the
go
keep.
in.
Yeah, yeah,
So maybe there is. They just haven't mentioned it. But
yeah,
yeah, essentially the initial assault by the traitors fails, and the Sons of Horus and Death Guard that are left in the terminus either die fighting or suffer running back through the tunnels. Um, and dealing with all the rad goodness that was down there. Only the World Eaters remain, hunted by the Blood Angels, and as we said before, sections of the city, entire sections of the city are
Yeah,
sealed off.
yeah.
Just due to the savagery of the fighting, the Blood Angels' actions are so barbaric. The Auxilia formally complained to High Command and the ranking Imperial Fist Astartes and banned the Blood Angels from the inner city, so they're kind of not allowed in to the
It's
important
it's
bit of the
nuts,
city.
isn't it? It's nuts at this point where like the city has almost been taken, that they are kind of like, okay, this is actually so bad we need to say.
These guys
Okay.
are fucking
Yeah.
nuts.
Like, you wouldn't have thought it'd be a priority, but clearly, yeah, it is.
And then constant Vox messages from other hives assaulted by the traitors trickle in. Entire hives destroyed in minutes by Titan legios. The undersea archaeology is boiled alive by orbital bombardments. Isolated settlements razed by the World Eaters. Riptide. Dissent runs rampant through the populace, stirred up by Alpha Legion infiltrators. And this is another thing I really like. The sneaky Alpha Legions
Yeah.
use this assault to kind of get their operators in the city, and they start causing dissent within the city. And I really like this as well because it kind of goes to show, it's the classic thing of people are a bit fucking stupid. You get one person, they're all right. You get a lot of people, they can be a bit stupid, and the population start kind of going against uh like the government
Yeah.
essentially through fear. And then they have to kind of start taking people away to patrol these areas because people are just being dickheads and having riots. And
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Whether starvation and things like that will kick in, isn't it? So
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So even with weeks of no enemy activity, the city sits on a knife edge of discontentment
yeah,
and barely contain insurrection bubbling below the surface. So I really like the way they put this in. It's kind of because these are just people. They don't give a fuck about the Emperor or Horus. They just want to live. That's all
yeah.
they
It's
care
interesting,
about.
like the psychology of the citizens, isn't it? That we don't
Yeah.
often see, but yeah, actually,
Um, and I
you just
really,
from knowing people, people will riot when they've not got enough. Like,
well,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, and fear is
yeah,
the biggest thing, isn't it? And this is
yeah,
kind of goes back to what the Kinslayer wanted. He's worked with the Night Lords, and he knows that
yeah,
fear can be just as potent as bombs and bullets.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so yeah, so there's a lull in the fighting. I keep getting boxes in night. There's a lull in the fighting. Auspex pings. Uh, and a massive dust cloud on the horizon. However, it's not made up of legionnaires or traitor auxilia, but million-strong horde of displaced civilians from other hive cities, driven forward by the traitors, with the traitors behind them. So essentially, what they've done is all these civilians they've taken from
Yeah,
these hives, they've been flattening. They basically herd them out and herd them towards Nikon City. Um, and obviously, the defenders know that these are just civilians running towards them.
yeah,
So on the walls, the guns are all silent. People don't want to shoot their own people. Um, and after minutes of silence, a single command comes through from the Palatine Lady with the Palatine Lady's clearance code, and it simply says "Open fire."
boom, the human meat shield.
Still, the guns remain silent until the grim Iron Hand, seeing what must be done, fired all artillery into the oncoming horde. Their cover now at risk. Traitor auxiliary mobile weapons hidden in the masses open fire on the walls. So basically, within this massive horde of civilians were solar auxiliary kind of weapons platforms
Yeah,
and infantry, and they now open fire. They had like artillery pieces. Um, Facing so many oncoming people, the artillery is not enough to thin the numbers. So every man and woman on the wall had to take up arms to counter them. So basically, there's so many civilians coming towards them that they don't have enough people to kill them. They
yeah,
can't kill them quick enough.
yeah,
I'm willing to press the attack now that the ruse is uncovered. The battle in the west becomes a long-range artillery battle. So, yeah, the auxiliary within this horde basically kind of stop and start firing their artillery at the walls.
yeah,
But I love the way this is explained. I love the fact that, yeah, basically there's a bit in the book kind of separate from the story, and it's a conversation, I believe, between one of the Imperial Fists and the Palatine Lady. And the Imperial Fist basically, because she doesn't want to give the order to open fire.
mm,
And essentially the Space Marine goes into her office and is like, look, we don't like it. Suck it up. because we have to do this. And then
Yeah.
after she's had this kind of talking to, she sends the order to
Sense the
open
code.
fire.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay,
But
yeah.
it's only because this Imperial Fist, and I think he says something like, it's something like, I don't like what I have to do, but I'm going back to the wall to do it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, God,
God will know his own, won't he? The Emperor will know
yeah,
his own. Doesn't matter who
it's
lives or dies.
it's
Yeah.
so cool. It's like, go on, you badass. Like,
Yeah.
although you are literally just gonna go kill civilians now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite. I like that. Again, it's a little bit of a psychological warfare thrown in there.
Yeah.
Uh, so with all the defenders had been pulled to the west to fight this kind of oncoming horde, there was only a single company of solo auxilia left to defend the wall. Uh, However, this company was an elite company of Saturnine rams backed up with heavy armor. Enough to halt the advance, the Riptide splits and surges around them into the spaceport like an angry, bloodthirsty river of mounted psychopaths around a rock. So yeah, essentially the World Eaters are just nuts,
Yeah.
but they're nuts enough to, they're not that batshit that they realize like we could all die fighting this, or we could just go around them and keep murdering easier things. Um, Conflicting orders to rally to the east and west sow confusion in the city's militia. The remaining militia armor swarms to the east in the spaceport, but falls under fire from the Sons of Horus forces that sweep in behind the Riptide. The massive defensive towers cannot fire, as they're still being used to keep the traitor legions at bay. Um, and as the Eastern Front collapses, the Blood Angels counterattack, sweeping into the oncoming Sons of Horus. So
Yeah.
once again, the Blood Angels sate their thirst.
They're just
Uh,
overwhelmed, aren't they? They can't deal with it. The massive cannons are fighting at the traitor legios.
yeah,
They can't
well,
deal with the civilians and it's
as
just
as we'll
utterly overwhelmed.
discover later on as well, the cannons are great at shooting big things a long way away, but can't shoot
Yeah.
small things down at their feet. They
Yeah.
obviously can't point down enough, which kind of comes in
Blow
more
itself
later
up.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, exactly. So they're not even, yeah, they're almost like the threat that's keeping the Legios at bay, because if the Legios manage to assault, like it'd be over
That's it, isn't it? Yeah, game over
in
as well.
in hours. Like, you know what I mean? You got like 100 Titans sat there waiting just
Yeah.
to tear the walls down. Um, but I do love the fact that the only reason this actually really succeeded, because the initial assault had failed.
Mm.
The human shields, that had kind of failed. It was only the fact that this bunch of complete knobhead world eaters just purely, I mean, I think it's luck, because they're not, by this point, they're so deranged
Yeah.
that they're not able to kind of coordinate enough, I don't think. Um, so yeah, so I just love the fact that it's just pure luck that they turn up,
Yeah. On a
and
flank that's not well defended, isn't
yeah,
it?
and
Yeah.
and happen to attack the opposite flank.
Yeah.
Uh, so on a prepared signal, the evacuation order is given. In the west, the auxiliary and Iron Hands withdraw, detonating massive grav charges and destroying swathes of the outer
Yeah.
city and the advancing traitors. The militia tanks outside the wall are able to disengage and return, but the Blood Angels remain entrenched in combat with the World Eaters. Imperial Fist armored detachments deploy to allow the Saturnine rams to withdraw. As a last desperate act, a full company of Imperial Fists deploy to the spaceport, board a Dr. Starte's destroyer, and I love this bit, and set its warp drive to go critical before teleporting out. The
Yeah, I love
drive
that.
detonates, taking most of the Riptide and half the spaceport with it. So they basically, yeah, they overcharge the warp drive of an Astartes destroyer, and yeah, the thing goes fucking thermal.
Love it.
The outer city falls, and only the sacrifices of the Blood Angels, themselves descending from the nobility and falling back to brutality of the Revenant Legion, allow most of the loyalists to withdraw to the inner city walls. A company of Blood Angel Terminators and their commander hold the main highway alone for hours before falling to the Sons of Horus. The traitor Titans remain at a distance, held off by the self-contained relic cannon towers. Um, and just to get a sense of the size of this wall, the outer wall, it talks in parts of the book about having firing points for entire tank companies. So you
Yeah,
could
okay.
literally drive entire companies of tanks to windows in this wall and shoot at the oncoming horde. So this wall, not terror size, but
It's a whopper.
Titans can see over it, but it's a
Yeah.
big fucker, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but it's pretty much fallen now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, So, although the outer city is now in traitor hands, a few loyalist pockets remain, including the first Nemesis Brigade. I love this. This bit was awesome.
These guys are
So,
very cool, aren't they?
we'd not really heard much about the Nemesis
No.
Brigades until these books came out, but they're essentially solo auxilia that are made up of convicts. So, they're basically your scum,
Yeah.
your scum and villainy. Uh, Made up of convicts, the other auxiliary militia refused to make any attempts to support them or help them withdraw. So basically, yeah, all the other militias basically just leave them. The levy
Leave them
leaves
to
them
die, don't they?
to
Yeah,
die.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially. But however, they kind of realize like we're not the bad guys, but we kind of look a lot like the bad guys. So it says that their armor's
We
black,
got
their armor's painted
scars, like
black.
one
Yeah, you
eye,
know what
an
I
eye
mean?
patch,
And
parrots on our shoulders.
we got skulls, skull badges. Are we the
Yeah.
bad guys? Um,
Yeah.
so basically, they just fake it till you make it. So they
Don
pretend,
their fake mustaches and then
yeah,
go in.
yes. And they, so basically, kind of, it talks about these pockets of resistance, and they were attacking, and fighting to the death, and they were like forming barricades and fighting. And then there's these lot that are like, fuck it, let's just pretend to be the bad guys and
Yeah.
drive towards the wall.
Yeah.
So yeah, they kind of use their similar appearance to pretend to be Chthonian headhunters, and they it says how they ambush a unit of Chthonian headhunters and then kind of take some of their stuff to look even more like
Yeah.
them before surrendering to a loyalist armored column. So they basically drive up to these tanks and are like, "We give up." And they're escorted back into the inner city, and their actions are rewarded. They're promoted to Palatine Ladies' personal guards, defending the Argent Tower. So the Argent Tower is like the command hub of Nikon City. Uh, and this really pisses off the Secundus levy commanders, who are all kind of described as being, like your toffs, your
Basically eaten, right? I mean, like,
yeah,
imagine, yeah,
literally
yeah,
born
yeah.
born into leadership rather than having earned it. This and the Secundus Levy was one of the units that kind of left the Nemesis Brigade to die. And yeah, they get called the turncoats as kind of like a term of endearment because they've pretended to be the traitors to get back into the walls. I just love the idea. I think if I was ever to do a solo auxiliary force, it would be of the first Nemesis Brigade.
Oh, mate, yeah, that would be
And you
absolutely
could
awesome.
just do like they'd be loyalists, but with little bits of like traitor armor stuck
Yeah,
on here and there,
yeah, I
a
like that.
few spikes here and there.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fucking awesome. Yeah, so I really, really like this story of the Nemesis Brigade. Um, and basically, yeah, at this point, any civilians left in the outer city are faced with certain death everywhere. Some refuge can be found in the south, where the bloodthirsty blood angels offer protection for a price. So basically, it's a blood price. Like you give them
Mm.
a pound of flesh and they'll look after you. Uh, it takes the traitors, and again, I like the way they talk about this. The traitors, it takes days to move more than just a vanguard into the inner city. So they're still
Yeah,
fighting these
yeah,
kind of elements of loyalist forces, and it talks about some are just like a handful of people, some are like entire
yeah.
companies.
I mean,
Uh,
geographically, it must be. I mean, a
well, it's
city of 2 billion
huge.
people
Yeah,
got to be absolutely mammoth,
I mean, you
So,
think
yeah.
what's London? 10 million, something like
Yeah, I think
that.
it's 14, but I mean, what's China? It's 1 point something billion, isn't it? I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, so yeah,
Um,
amazing size of this city, just to geographically just walk your way through it.
and I think again that's something to kind of bear in mind because when you're reading it and you're like, well, how can there be an entire company of people just left fighting? And then
Mm,
when you actually think of the size,
yeah,
this city is essentially China.
yeah,
Like, you know what I mean?
it's huge.
Like, yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah. At this point, Legio Astorum stands proud, towering over the inner city walls, causing devastation to traitor advance. But the traitor Legios remain held at bay by the massive defensive towers, now standing as isolated islands in the sea of traitor forces. So yeah, as we described before, these massive defensive towers, they're basically like bastions. They can stand on
yeah,
their own. So even though they're kind of surrounded by traitors, the traitors can't really get into them. So they're still keeping the traitor legios at bay whilst the loyalist legios can kind of shoot over the defensive towers. Um, Traitor artillery sets up at its most extreme range, and the ground between the inner wall and the traitor positions becomes a fire and phosphex choked wasteland. So this is, yeah, literally like think World War One and then turn it up a billion notches, and you're kind of hitting where this is at now. So not a fun place to be living. Um, And yeah, this is what I mentioned before. So vast sally ports in the inner wall allow loyalist armored columns to venture out to strike at the traitor forces on 4 separate occasions, despite taking massive losses and depleting reserves. So they're able to kind of sally out of these ports, but they also have these kind of like firing positions built within the walls, which again I think is a really cool idea. You think of like firing points for guys, but not for tanks. Um, and the most successful of these kind of uh I mean essentially the loyalists are just they're on the back foot, but they still want to keep giving a bloody nose.
Yeah.
And one of the most kind of successful ones they have involves Saturnine rams, and they advance to forward positions in the dead of night, but they use phosphex bombardments to mask them from augury scanners. So basically the tanks go hold down and they launch these fucking phosphex bombardments, and the tanks use that as cover to drive out. And then once in place, the pan-crypta tanks openly mobilize, and they talk about it's not just tanks here; it's infantry kind of launch an assault as well. The traitors open fire on this force coming out, not knowing that Saturnine rams are hidden. And again, this has very kind of Talon vibes of like
Yeah.
they're hidden in this kind of toxic mist. Um, and as soon as the traitors open fire on this pan-crypta force, like openly coming out, the Saturnine ram tanks start destroying these artillery positions. So the Pancrypta kind of they start getting whacked by this artillery, but as Saturnine rams start inflicting casualties, the artillery obviously gets less and less and less.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea of that. I really like the fact that they use this kind of phosphex uh, um, as cover. Um, Flares launch from the wall and a massed infantry assault by pan-crypto forces results in a deadly exchange in the wasteland. They advance halfway before withdrawing in a pre-prepared pattern, luring traitor forces into the killing ground. Trapped between the reinforcing loyalists at the walls and the Saturnine rams returning to the walls, the traitor forces take horrific losses. Um, but it's not all one-sided. Like
Yeah.
Dawn reveals the devastation. Thousands of dead loyalist infantry and hundreds of burning tank hulls mark the end of the assault. It gained the loyalists no ground, but it's considered a success as it stops the traitor artillery for a day before more is brought up and the bombardment resumes. So I feel like this one little engagement here basically sums up every kind of conflict in the Garmin system of
Yeah.
like basically all that happened is everyone's forces is a little bit less than they were yesterday.
Yeah. It's just
Like
held them off
you
one
you
more day,
you
one more
haven't
minute, one
you
more
haven't
hour.
really achieved anything. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you say, other than gained some time.
Yeah.
And that's all this really comes back to is just time. Ultimately, these 4 attacks fell in their goal. They never managed to goad the traitors into a direct assault on the inner wall, where the defenses and titans could be brought to bear. So, yeah, it's a success, but it's not really a
Yeah.
success. Um, the last lights go out. Without being drawn into the walls, the traitors focus their attentions on the defensive towers to take the relic cannons offline so the Legio Mortis can advance. So this is the one thing that's really stopping their assault now is these these archaic cannons. And the initial tower, the Amethystite Tower, falls first. So, bearing a single weak point, a rent into the walls by the collapse of the adjoining bridge, it is defended by only 100 Imperial Fists and 5,000 solar auxiliaries. So, it describes in the book it kind of had a crack in the wall, basically. And that was enough for the traitors to be like, well, of all of them,
Yeah.
that's probably the one we can take. And they, well, it's written thousands of traitor militia here, but it is literally thousands and thousands of militia are thrown into the breach. And the Imperial Fists kind of realize that they're just doing this to get the loyalists to burn through ammunition.
Yeah.
So the Imperial Fist Terminators, they put a load of Terminators in this breach to defend it. End up using kind of blade and fist just to conserve ammo. So it's just a load of Terminators, just murdering traitor militia. Until the Chthonian headhunters known as the Mountain Breakers bombard the tower with their artillery for days, not caring how many of their own they kill. So they're still launching assaults as they're launching artillery. And I mean, I guess it's quite handy that you have a unit known as the Mountain Breakers to to try and crack open this bastion. Um, so the artillery falls silent, and the fists rally all surviving forces at the breach, ready for the expected assault. At this time, the Death Guard breached the wall on the opposite side, having used the distraction to slowly sap the wall. So basically, the Death Guard had been using this as a distraction, and they'd set up a fuckload of explosives, and they breached the wall. With little defenses on that side, the Death Guard quickly overrun the tower, with the last Imperial Fist Centurion detonating the
That
deep
seems like it
under.
seems quite clever for the Death Guard. It seems like unusually clever for the Death Guard to do
Well,
that.
I guess they're under the command of a Sons of Horus officer, aren't they? Yeah. So, but it
Exactly
is
right.
very Death Guard to just kind of sit under this horrific bombardment and just set up a load of explosives,
Yeah.
and then into the breach. And it does a good job in the book of kind of describing, like these last kind of little dots of yellow kind of getting blinked out. But before they die, the last Imperial Centurion detonates deep underground atomantic reactor, causing the collapse of the tower and bringing the massive relic cannon crashing to the ground. And it describes weeks later, the Jadeite tower is also overrun by the Sons of Horus, with the last act of the defenders being to use their artillery to sabotage that cannon as well. So, yeah, the Jadeite tower, we'll say.
Yep.
Basically, if I remember correctly, there were no Astartes in that tower, so they didn't have the ability to detonate the reactor or whatever. So they used their own artillery to shoot the barrel of
Oh,
the gun,
God.
basically. Because the worst thing would be that the traitors take the gun over
Yeah, it falls into the
and then
enemy hands.
turns
Yeah.
it on to the
Yeah.
loyalist Titans and the city. So, um, unfortunately for the loyalists, two of these bastion towers have now been taken.
Yeah, it's not good as that.
With the news of the tower's destruction, the temper of the inner city only gets worse. Riots break out in refugee camps, forcing guards to deploy to maintain peace instead of manning the walls. Worse, some of Secundus Levy generals and nobles of the city start talking about alternatives to futile last stands. So here we have it. The posh folk want to
Bloody
give
it's
up.
bloody Etonians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they realize it's not all going to plan, so they want to make a deal with the devil. Um, in an attempt to rally morale, the last remaining commander of Imperial Fist, Centaur Kershan, along with Blood Angels and Iron Hands, rally the Astartes for a decisive push. And I think in the book this describes kind of like 5,000 Astartes, so it's still a fairly hefty force of Space Marines in Land Raiders. However, as they're gathering at the sally ports, the Titans of the Legio Mortis and Legio Vulpa finally take to the field. So obviously, with the guns out of action, the two
Yeah.
most western towers destroyed, the Titans advance at flank speed, which only allows the remaining towers a single shot each before they're masked by the bulk of the city. The Pyrrhic Tower only manages to short out a Legio Vulpa Warmaster, Titan's Void Shields, whilst the Ferrum Tower, which was being manned by Iron Hands, rips a leg off a Legio Mortis Warlord, which collapses and explodes. And in the book,
Oh yeah.
it talks about killing all the knights that were surrounding it to protect it. So
Yeah.
that's quite cool. Mortis and Volpa are finally committed to the field. Legio Astorum steps over the inner wall and meets them in the ruins of the outer city, followed by the armored columns of the Astartes.
This is it, isn't it? This is the end game now. Once you know
This
that the
is
Titans have been committed,
this is it. And
this is
again,
it.
this is where when I was reading this, I was like, "Oh, this would be such a cool campaign
Yeah.
weekend," because this is the part where the Adeptus Titanicus players finally get involved.
Yeah.
So the lighter Warhound and Knights of Vulpera and Astorum clash in the ruins of the outer city before the heavier Astorum Titans engage and destroy the Vulpera Titans. The heavyweight fight begins between the heavier Titans of Mortis and Astorum. Over 100 Titans take the field that day, but Astorum is distinctly outnumbered. Knowing there is no survival except in victory, they fight to the death. So they literally know, they know if they retreat, they're going to die because there's nowhere to retreat at this
Yeah,
point. Like
exactly.
the city's pretty much fallen. Um, and by dusk, the last Astoran warlord falls to three Mortis Reavers, and it does a good job because I am not a huge fan of Titan stories, but it does a really good job of like this ancient Astoran warlord that managed to kind of take out three Titans before it finally succumbed. Um, and was just basically destroyed. The traitors take the day, but at great cost. Of the 50 plus traitor titans committed, many are destroyed. All the remaining ones are damaged, and only a handful can leave the field under their own power.
Yeah,
And
fuck
again,
you,
it's that kind
traders.
of, but it's that recurring theme of like, yes, but the loyalists also lost lots
Yeah,
and lots of
yeah,
titans. So kind of nothing's really been gained. The traitors obtain victory, and there is nothing to stop their march on the wall. Um, Astarte's tank companies try valiantly but score little damage before being swept aside and crushed. So Central Curtion is killed when his Spartan is crushed under the heel of a Mortis Titan. He essentially knew that they had nowhere to retreat to, so
yeah,
he fought to the death. His final broadcast was, "My duty ends in death. Those who yet live must carry it now in my name." And this kind of final broadcast will have an effect, both positive and negative, on the remaining defenders. So the sight of so many fallen titans, coupled with the death of the Astartes and the sea of oncoming traitor forces finally attacking en masse, is finally enough to break the morale of the city. Many of the levy and auxiliary forces kind of abandon their posts, fleeing the walls. And it does a really good job in the book of describing the guys, well, the people who remain on the wall are basically only remain there because they have at this point gone mental. Like from everything that's happened to them during the siege, they have now lost their minds, and the only reason they stay fighting is because they have completely lost their minds, and the kind of sane ones are running away.
yeah,
Uh, the traitor titans rip dozens of breaches into the wall, and traitor forces surge into the inner city. And again, this wall is described as literally just being a few little bits of the wall still standing. And this is what the turrets, this is what the Bastion gun turrets was stopping the traitor titans coming in and just flattening the wall because the siege would have been over in a day otherwise. Um, and it describes in the book many great deeds would be done in those final hours, many heroes born and many sacrifices made, but none would be remembered, for none would survive to tell of it. And I really like this quote because it's kind of quite poignant when you think of our own history. You think of ancient battles that have probably happened, and we have no recollection of what
mm,
happened in it. There's no written history of what happened in it. So
yeah,
there could have been all sorts of batshit crazy stuff, but we'll never know about it.
yeah,
And this is exactly it. And this again is a little window into essentially millions of battles happening across the Garmin system. This is just talking about one battle, but this is happening across the entire system, where people are doing heroic things or turning traitor or whatever it is, and no one will ever remember it because no one will live to tell the tale, like the ultimate grim dark. So even as the city fought its last treachery strikes at the height of the Argent Tower. So the all the Nobed, Etonian, Secundus, Levy generals rebel against the Palatine lady, hoping that if they deliver the city to the traitors, they
ugh.
might be allowed to live. And it's
Such
just like,
cowards, such cowards.
but it's yeah, it's I like it because it's what people put in a position of power will a lot of the time do, you know. I'm the general of this force because my dad's rich,
Yeah, yeah,
not because I'm here to fight. Um, and there's a really cool bit in the book where basically these scumbag prison-born pond life Nemesis Brigade made up of prisoners and convicts are like, nah, fuck this noise, and they just start murdering all these Secundus Levy knobheads that have turned turncoat. So the irony of the people who pretended to be turncoat are now defending the Palatine
Yeah,
lady
100%.
from the turncoats. And yeah, it does a really good story of kind of room to room fighting in this kind of command tower, protecting the lady for as long as they could. Um, and it says here, enough for her to activate her final sanction. At the Palatine Lady's command, strategic explosives are triggered, releasing a huge cloud of toxic bioweapons. The cloud of death spreads slowly across the city, killing all who contact it. Only Astartes and void armored solar auxiliary are safe. And again, it describes as they're safe as long as their armor hasn't been pierced or damaged in any way.
Yeah.
Even Astartes will succumb to these kind of toxic weapons. Uh, and a few pockets of isolated forces continue to fight, even as the city dies around them. Um, Around 100 of the First Nemesis Brigade have armor that can protect them, and they're able to escape the inner city, escorting the Palatine Lady. With the virus bombing, the command and control systems for the Anvil, the massive defensive space station, are destroyed, and that loses power to many of its systems. Um, and basically, as it loses its power, the traitor fleets in space realize this, and they launch their attack
Yeah.
on the Anvil and fairly quickly destroy the Anvil. Nikon City now exists as a mausoleum that rings with the sound of small, isolated for weeks to come. But these are little more than dying twitches of a city already dead. Within a day of the virus bombing, Chieftain Inshar stands in the throne room of the ruins of the Argent Tower, having finally claimed victory for Horus. But what victory is it? And it even
Yeah.
talks about with the traitors, because obviously a lot of it's malicious, so they can't even enter the city because these toxins will kill them. So they have to wait. I mean, the Space Marines can go in, but the normal dickheads are just kind of sat outside waiting for these toxins to disappear. And there's just one thing I want to go back to because it's quite a cool piece in the book. So it says about around 100 Nemesis Brigade guys have armor that can protect them, and they're able to escape the inner city, escorting the Palatine Lady. But in the book, it doesn't actually say the Palatine Lady. It
Right.
just says that they escape, and one of the
Right.
people they escape with is in kind of void armor and
Right.
doesn't look like a soldier. So
Right. Oh, interesting that it
it
is the
doesn't
Palatine
actually
Lady, but you can
say.
infer that it is the
Yeah, yeah.
Palatine
So
Lady.
they've
Okay.
escaped with someone.
Yeah.
You can guess who it is,
Yeah.
and I really like that as well.
That's
Like
awesome.
yeah, if I was to do Solar Auxilia, fucking First Nemesis Brigade all
Yeah.
over it,
They are the
absolute
ones.
dick swingers. Um, so those that remain. So the remaining forces continue to fight for weeks. The Theta-Garmon cohorts are so entrenched in the remains of the spaceport, they only fall when the Justarian are deployed. Um, the
That's
traitors
like
land.
that's like the elite of the elite as well, right? Like
Yeah,
if you've got to
yeah.
send the Just Theron in, you just it's an enemy worth fighting.
And again, it talks about the Theta-Garmon as basically they're just so fucking stubborn by now. They're
Yeah.
just like basically anyone who's still alive now is either a dribbling wreck or is basically Arnold
Or
Schwarzenegger.
a
They're just
reborn cohort, basically.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
stubborn 11. Yeah.
They're yeah, yeah, exactly fearless.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like yeah, they're just yeah. And again, it kind of describes that a lot of them are just actually at this point just mental, like
Yeah.
they've lost their minds.
Yeah.
Um, And the traitors, with the traitor fleet able to now land because Nikon's no longer defended from space, they start landing huge cargo vessels to corral the prisoners and loot away from the city. Um, and a lot of this is kind of human prisoners. They're basically taking people off to go to other places and do what they've done of essentially
Yeah.
using these human shields. Um, And as they're doing this, surprise! A massed assault of nearly 1,000 blood angels, long thought dead, sweeping from the south of the city, made of rapidly introduced inductate and most wearing mismatched armor scavenged from the dead of a half dozen legions. They fight with the ferocity of the Revenant Legion. At their head marches the Blood Angel Praetor, thought dead, now interred in a contemptor. So
Yeah, I
basically,
mean, I love this, right? Because
it's fucking
you could
awesome.
basically do a Fury of the Ancients like list, just with like
Yeah.
3 dreads, with this guy as your warlord, and then
And
tons of inducti.
And literally, they are just like civilians that they're like, you're now a space marine. Get this in
Yeah.
you. And they've just been, yeah, just eating
Yeah.
people and just literally, you know, because the normal kind of image of a blood angel is this kind of artistic, kind of
Yeah. It's just gone, isn't
beautiful
it? Yeah.
gold
It's
armor, you
none
know,
of that. None of that for
majestic.
these guys.
And these are just, you know, these are like Skaven in red armor. They're
Yeah.
literally just, yeah, and they come out and just murder fuckers.
Gribbly little rats. Yeah.
Rescuing many prisoners, including the surviving Nemesis Brigade and their VIP. They're also able to smash through the World Eater's command and slay Praetor Rejak. So I think it's actually the Blood Angel Praetor that kills him.
Ah, nice. Yeah. Of course. Glory.
Recognizing there's no point in fighting for a dead city, they turn west with their rescued cohort and march to the landing positions of the former encampments of the traitors. So they basically go to the traitor camp and kind of destroy the few people that are left there defending it. Wiping them out in a single rash frontal assault, they board all the survivors onto ships and attempt to break orbit. So they're literally attempting to escape off the planet, but obviously the traitor fleet is above them. Warned by the ground forces, Sons of Horus destroyer attempts to intercept the fleeing cargo ships before it is suddenly destroyed by a cheeky shot. This is a six. So the Iron Hands, who remained in the Ferrum Tower, saw what was happening and just launched one shot into space and destroyed a Sons of Horus destroyer spaceship with one of the relic guns.
One last roll of the dice,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
And with that destroyer destroyed, the ships with the loyalists on it
Able to flee, aren't they?
are able
Yeah.
to flee. The shot that saved the fleeing loyalists is enough to overload the Ferrum Tower's reactor, already straining for weeks and maintaining its void shields, which detonates in a huge fireball. The last loyalist position on Beta-Garmon 2 is the Pyrite Tower, which survives for 2 months. When it eventually falls, the 100 starving defenders go out in a blaze of glory and destroy the gun.
2 months is
Finally,
crazy. That's crazy.
yeah,
Like the whole
yeah.
place has been taken apart from that one tower.
And you've
It's
got,
nuts.
again, like you've got Titans and stuff, but
Yeah.
obviously if they go near it.
They're just gonna, yeah, get
And
yeah,
finally, the tomb of Nikon City falls silent. And that's
crazy.
it. Does it? Yeah. So
Yeah,
the
there's
traitors.
two more slides, two more slides. Yeah.
So the traitors. So again, this comes back to kind of the whole kind of thing about the Garmin conflict is the traitors have their victory, but at extreme cost. Nearly 50% of the force was committed to Beta Garmin 2 were destroyed, and it's delayed them by months. The tech savants on Terra deem it as an acceptable loss given the amount of time it brought and traitor resources consumed. So
Yeah.
the traitors see it as a victory because Horus said take Beta Garmin 2, and they've taken Beta Garmin 2.
Yeah.
And the loyalists see it as a victory
Yeah.
because Dawn said hold them for as long as you can, and they held them for as long as they can.
It goes back to what we said in the last episode. There was like an algorithm that had worked out that every soldier was
yeah,
worth a certain amount of time, and that it was acceptable for that many losses, as long as the doomsday clock, it slowed the doomsday clock or Horus coming to
yeah.
town.
And essentially, the destruction of Nikon City, kind of as news spreads out about what's happened, it escalates the already batshit conflict in the Garmin cluster. And essentially, after this, all gloves are off.
Yeah.
Like entire cities are destroyed in heartbeats. And it talks about loyalists using kind of nuclear weapons on high cities and stuff that they weren't doing up until that point.
Yeah.
So basically, all the naughty weapons come out and yeah, the Garmin cluster just again just turns up a notch into even more death and destruction. And across the stars, Orogo Dawn meets with Sanguinius and Jagati Khan, forms his plans for the Garmin cluster. See part 2. The great
Yeah.
slaughter has begun.
There's a last little bit, a little postscript here.
So I didn't read this. Do you want to read
Oh,
this?
yeah, sure.
I've done
So this is a cool little detail. This is actually in the Great Slaughter book. So in the days that followed the end of the Imperium that once was, after Horus was driven from the skies of Terra and the Emperor lay to rest on his golden throne, Nikon rose once more. Not the city of old, for that is gone forever, but a simple memorial of artfully sculpted marble set within the precincts of the Imperial Archive on Terra. So they basically made a kind of a model of the
Oh,
city
okay. Yeah,
in marble,
yeah.
and then displayed it in the archives in Terra. It's kind of like how I imagine if you've seen Game of Thrones in the
Yeah,
new
yeah,
House
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah,
Dragon,
yeah.
he has old Valyria in his room, and it's kind of reminds me of that. I've seen the tiny spires and flowing walls, and in every detail it is true, every detail save one. This tribute is a clean and carefully chosen image, for the streets are not choked with the dead, the walls are not sundered by shells on our own sabotage. It does not show the great billowing clouds of phage that rob so many of life, so that distant generals might commend such a defiant stand. I am told it stands to honor the courage of those that fought for the Emperor, but it forgets the terror and carnage we inflicted in his name. It forgets that what Neocon must ever be a memorial to, not to the glory of war and the temporary salve of fury, but to the cost of apathy and ignorance. All that befell us in the age of darkness we could have forestalled, but we chose to look away, and in our arrogance we brought it into being, the great slaughter.
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that this like looks back. It's somebody,
yeah,
you know, in whatever millennium after the Horus Heresy, and
yeah,
like looking back at the great slaughter
yeah.
of
It's
Neocon
it's
City and Beta-Garmon cluster.
and that's it. Therein ends the Garmin Law series. Hopefully you enjoyed these. I certainly enjoyed making them. I'll be honest, like I'm quite bad at buying these books and never reading them. And
Yeah,
doing these series has forced me to read them. And actually, I've really enjoyed
that's
them.
some
I
great
think,
lore, right? I think
yeah, yeah,
that's a good point because I think, and I'm definitely guilty of this. I will get a new book and then just immediately flick to the rules,
yeah, yeah,
and then put it down. But as you say, these series have been great to for us to understand what the actual stories are, and hopefully for you guys to, if you don't have the time or don't want to read the books, you could just get them in kind of like pre-packaged form, just us kind of going through the story to get the main events. But as Lee has said, there are loads of details to these stories, things that we obviously have to miss out due to time. Um, I can think back on the last one, really good detail was the fact that there was almost like a civil war on Terra while they were talking about sending Jagatai Khan
yes, yeah, yeah,
away, that
yeah.
had to be suppressed by some of the senior commanders of the army, which is just great little snippet that we may not have known previously. So yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, like I say, the writing is really good, and
yeah,
I enjoy it actually more because, like I said at the start of the show, it almost takes it's almost like it's like reading a history book, isn't it?
yeah.
It's like
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
reading, I don't know, um, about I don't know, this
Stalingrad, right?
yeah,
Something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And you get kind of the facts and figures rather
yeah,
than the kind of blood and guts of
yeah.
what you would get in a story. And I really like that. For me, I think that gives me more ideas um, of how
Oh,
to run events or
well,
how to run
yeah,
campaigns
and
or
create
like you
armies
say,
with
yeah.
The
Oh
Nemesis
man,
cohorts, right?
if I had the time to do a solo auxiliary force, it would be the first Nemesis Brigade.
Yeah.
After reading this, definitely 100%. Maybe it's something I'll get around to at one point when I fucking retire or something. Um, so the next Heresy Hammer lore videos we do, and it'll be a little while yet, I'd imagine, will be on the Talon Legiones Imperialis book, and this is one I'm personally looking forward to as someone who runs Iron Warriors.
Yeah, you love Talon, don't you? Actually, ever since I've known you, you've always been banging on about Talon over the
Yeah,
past 10 years. Yeah.
yeah, and the books, the Black Library books they've released, I don't think they were amazing, but I
Hmm.
think they did a good job of kind of showing what it's like
Hmm.
fighting in like the toxic wastelands
Yeah.
of Talon. So if you are interested in it, give those a read. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just fucking who doesn't love
I
Iron
imagine it would
Warriors?
be
Who
like,
doesn't love Iron Warriors doing
no,
Iron Warriors shit?
I
Like
imagine it's going to be quite like, the Battle of Kursk, right? With the biggest tank
yeah, I
battle
mean,
in
I'm
World
just
War Two,
interested to
that
see what
kind of
they
thing.
do because they tend to add new stuff to this,
Yeah.
and actually Talon has had a fair bit written about it, so I'll
Yeah.
be interested to see what they do and where they go with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that will be the next one.
I'm looking
It's
forward to that
actually
already. Actually, I'm
it's up
kind
for
of like, oh,
pre-order, isn't
that's. I think yeah, I saw like I don't keep track too much of Legions Imperialis, but I know that it is coming if
it?
it hasn't
Yeah.
already dropped. So yeah,
Cool. Okay. And then finally, just before we head off, shout out to Battle Bling. If you want to recreate your 100 uh, Titan
Titans. Yeah,
Maniple, then check out Battle Bling. They do all sorts of 3D printing, some 28mm, but a lot of it is more epic Adeptus Titanicus stuff. So go check them out. Beowulf, again, producing some awesome 3D printed stuff. If you have anything you want to produce in, go give them a shout. And if you want some terrain to run your Nikon City battles, then check out Sacrus Mundus. They produce files for 3D printing for terrain. And as you can see in the pictures, it looks fucking awesome.
yeah, it's amazing.
Really, really cool. So yeah, go check them out. And then finally, shout out to our top tier Patreon Praetors. Um, thank you very, very much to you guys for continuing to support us. Thank you to all our patrons, but a special big thank you to our Praetor patrons. And I
These
believe,
are
are we sending?
yeah. So these are Heresy Hammer Praetors are like our nemesis, first company
Yes, this is the Nemesis.
defending us, the Palatine Lady.
First Nemesis Brigade with Rob being the Palatine Lady. Help me, help me.
These are our nemesis cohort.
And
And
they are
yeah.
rewarded with gifts from the Palatine Lady.
To avoid to avoid to not get virus bombed, these guys get
Yeah.
special armor in the form of Heresy Hammer t-shirts, which are going to be kind of start being delivered next month. So John has done the first, I think, 50 t-shirts actually. I think he's done
Crikey.
all of our Praetors up until the end of kind of first 4 months of Pro Tours. So he's done them all, printing them all off, and those are being sent to us. So those will go out at in September. The last round of giveaways, the Heresy Hammer model is going out this month, and then we go to t-shirts and dice tray and a secret one that I keep on saying I'm going to show, but I keep on playing games. I'm like, oh, I'll use this to show what this thing is, and then I just keep on forgetting. So I will be showing you our third item that we shall be giving away very, very soon. But yeah, thank you to our first Nemesis cohort members.
And if you would like to go check out our Patreon, just Google Heresy Hammer Patreon. We release 2 Tacticas a month,
Yeah.
amongst other goodies and prizes and whatnot. So if you'd like to support us, please go and follow that. And I believe there's a 7-day free trial. Is there? Is that
Yeah,
still
that's right. So
going
we've
on?
just started, well, we're just about to start a Mechanicum series, which we obviously spoke about an awful lot on the last show that we did all together. And I think I would imagine we're probably recording the first one this week or next week. I know that we've got the timetable. I'd need to check it. But yeah, expect lots of shows on Mechanicum, but you can try a 7-day free trial if you want to check out some of the videos that we have done.
Oh, thank you very much, guys. And if you've made it this far, please like, subscribe, share a comment. Did you like it? Did you like the book? Did you not? Have we got anything wrong? Probably. If you have any messages, then heresyhammer30k@gmail.com. If we don't respond or get back to you or ignore you, just send a message again because we have like 15,000 unread emails. So it's not that we're ignoring you, it's just that we're a bit shit at admin.
Got better since Kerry's come on board, though, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, definitely. Yeah. We are doing a community show once a month. So if you have lists or questions, then again, send us an email and we'll try and answer
Yeah,
or
actually, you know the
review
one
your
you
list.
did, the one you did at the start of
That was
this
a good
month.
one, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so and also lots of conversation about Brutal and
Yeah.
how it is a
Yeah.
plague and a curse on the Horus Heresy scene. It was really interesting to see the conversations off the back of that show.
And I'll be honest, it was something I've never really thought of before.
Yeah.
So yeah, really good question.
Mm.
So yeah. And if you haven't checked out our community shows, then go check them out. Um, I don't know what we're doing next. What we're doing next?
So
Not next chat.
I think it's I want to say Blood Angels is Blood Angels Legion review. That's what I want to say.
Blood Angels. So
Mm.
if not, then it's not. But if it is, then it is. Until then, hopefully next time I see you, you can see me. But until then, thank you very much, guys. See you later. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye now.